Welcome to the second edition of our Classic Car series. In this we take a look at French, Italian and German cars in Perth, including major and minor marques. Western Australia has a long association with the well-known European brands and is also home to some unusual and lesser known classics. Join us as we take a look at a plethora of Euro brands in both shows and motorsports here. Renault's Billancourt factory in Paris produced some of the most interesting cars that Renault has offered the public since the company's inception in the late 1890s. Renault seems to have been first sold in Perth in 1903 by the American Motor Car and Vehicle Company, and allowing for a couple of breaks, still being sold here over 100 years later. With us is Mark Dudo, who's got a very interesting 1977 Alpine. Tell us a little bit about the car and its background, Mark.
Look, the car itself, as you quite rightly said, is an Alpine 110, and this is one of the later ones out of that particular run. They only ran for about 10 years, almost from I guess about 67 to 77, and this was the last one, the SX, 911 SX. It was probably not the most powerful of them, but there were more powerful ones. But at this stage, they were just kind of detuning them, I think, at that point.
And why Renault rather than Peugeot or another French car?
Oh, I've always had Renaults ever since I was a young bloke, I suppose. You know, I've gone through the 8s, the 10s, and all those sorts of things, and used to rally an 8 Gordini many years ago in the late 60s, early 70s, and so of course the passion never stopped, I guess.
And work being done on this one currently?
Yeah, this one, when I first got it, it was completely, absolutely stripped down. There was just a basic shell and nothing else. Everything else was in cardboard boxes, or what was of it was in cardboard boxes. And so, having sat in the garage probably for about 3 years, my wife saying, well, are you going to do something about it or not? And me looking at it and thinking, well, this is just too big a task for me. Actually, nothing actually got done. So this year, it was a do or die. So in January 1, that was my New Year's resolution, and I started. And actually, I tell you what, it's been a fascinating journey so far. It's just trying to, work out what goes in this particular hole, or what part goes in there, and so forth. And we've just gone from there.
Mark, what about how many of these vehicles are around?
This was the last run of that particular model, and I think there were less than 400, if my memory serves me well, of the SX that were actually built. In total, in the 10 years that they were actually made, the complete model run, I think there was I think it was about 7,000 from memory. I'm not exactly sure on that, but I think it was around about the 7,000. So not very many, and I guess in that instance makes it quite a good little car as a collector's item.
Did we mention Morris Davin?
Morris, yes, I met Morris, and unfortunately his car isn't in Perth at the moment. He actually sold it and has now gone to the eastern states, so hopefully it's found a good home. He was very passionate about his cars, and he had that one for a fair while, and I must admit I learned a lot off him with regards to restoring of this particular one, because if somebody's already had that information and had gone through it, they can save you a lot of heartache, and put you in the right direction, especially with websites. And that's the amazing thing nowadays, that you can look and find things in France that you didn't think were available at a price, of course, but hey, if you want them, then you've got to get them.
With these cars, we all aim at rebuilding a perfect car, but how about concourse for yourself?
No, I probably go along a slightly different direction. I actually want to use this one, and I want to use it in historical rallies. I've got in partnership a Renault 8 Gordini, and we've used that one extensively in historical rallies and get a lot of fun out of it. And of course, this one I'd like to do the same sort of thing. So if it's not perfect, that doesn't worry me. As long as it goes and it's nice to drive, that's important. Look, I think there's two different looks on that one. You either do it so that it's totally better than how it came out of the factory, and then let people enjoy it, or you enjoy it yourself. I'm not saying one's right or one's wrong. It's just two different approaches.
So down the track a little, we can look forward to waving to you in the traffic.
You sure can. Well, I hope you can.
Right, well, many thanks.
No worries at all, and thank you very much indeed for speaking to me.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
For the young at heart, Diesel Motors would have sold you one of these vehicles, which always reminded people of amphibious land sea craft. In fact, it is a much sleeker design than the British Amphicar. Of course, the Floride is definitely no swimmer. The Charleston and other novel versions of the 2CV were aimed at the carefree, youthful market, and this special edition has a Monet painting on the boot lid. If you've never been up close and personal to a 2CV, let it happen. You will fall in love with their persona, a real ugly duckling that you just can't ignore. Driving them is a real pleasure and experience too, and having a 2CV in your driveway guarantees that the neighbours will talk. Diesel Motors sold many Renaults in Perth during the 1950s, popular in a time when British car manufacturers were still dishing up pre-war cars. Renault offered West Australians the unusual and the unorthodox. Rear-engined cars had been rare before World War II, while front-wheel drive, as the norm, was still years off. Europe, however, still teased us with new technology considered weird then. A drive-in one, especially up through Perth's Darling Range, is enough to tell you of the uniqueness of this little Renault. Roland Sleep, tell us something about your Peugeot.
Well, this vehicle came from Margaret River. It was owned by a farmer down there since new, and there's only one other short owner, so basically I'm the second owner of the vehicle. It had been used, I understand, by this farmer to go into town, back again, that sort of thing, just general running. And it's done around about 280,000 kilometres, and I've had it for about 2 years now.
So it's very, very original.
Very, very original.
Plans for restoration of any sort?
Well, it's had a number of things done restoration-wise already, including the front suspension. The head on the motor has been off, and it's been, properly, professionally restored. Front and back windscreens have been popped out. Rust has been removed, and general tidy up on the body. Back suspension has been worked on. Just general bits and pieces like boot hinges and things like that have all been replaced or repaired, so that everything's in good working order. All the window winders, door handles, locking mechanisms, all that sort of stuff. I've been right through everything, lubricated it and all that sort of thing. So it's in very good running order, put it that way, with some restoration done. And I just intend to keep it on the road in good condition. Anything that comes up, attend to it, so that in future years it will be a good running car, a fine example of that mark.
So why the DZL rather than DSL on the personalised plates?
Well, that's the way it comes out of the mouth, isn't it? Diesel, with a Z, and I thought that's the best way to make it sound that way. It tricks a lot of people, they don't know what on earth it's about.
Tell me your other stable of cars at home?
We have another Peugeot at home, it's a 505, which is the model after this one. Unfortunately, it's a petrol car, but never mind, it's still a good runner. So, yeah. Well, I think with the two vehicles I've got, I would say that there's going to be quite a few years of ownership and driving of those. If I come into a heap of money, I'll probably buy a brand new 407 or something like that. But I'll essentially keep these vehicles, and with Peugeot, I'll be sticking right by it. Yeah.
It would have to be French Lotto, of course.
I don't care, as long as it's a lot of money.
Thanks for your help.
Okay.
Cheers. Perth's Dean Motor Car and Cab Company sold the first Peugeot cars here in 1908, while in the post-World War II years, Wentworth Motors and then Dependable Motors became the chief retailers. Today, Allpike Peugeot is Perth's sole franchise. The Pininfarina styling in this era, with its grand fins, was enjoyed by the French and adopted eagerly by the British, so that Wolseleys and Peugeots look like sisters from the same design studio, which of course they are. With the Renault 16, its tippy-tip toe stance gives it away as a Renault, a car much loved by rallyists and everyday motorists. John Briscassen is with us with his most magnificent Citroën. Tell us a bit about it, John.
I've owned the car for a couple of years. I bought it fully restored off a gentleman called Lawrence Ball. He'd restored it after finding out that the car had been delivered to the Fremantle port by mistake and sent it to Canada, and no one else wanted it, so he picked the car up, restored it from the ground up and presented it like this. I bought it off him. I haven't done anything to it except minor servicing, and really enjoyed driving it, and as you can see from the crowd here today, a lot of admiring glances.
The French refer to their cars as grand routiers, meaning highway cruisers. Is that true about this?
Oh, with this car, definitely. Yeah, it's very hard to maintain it under the speed limit. Not that it's a very fast car, but the ride is just so gentle and magnificent that you don't realise how fast you're going.
What about the mascot? I don't recall having seen a Citroën with the mascot.
I think Lawrence found that they do come on some of these DS's. He's put his own little badge work on the front, but it certainly helps to lift the bonnet up and down, and it adds to the glamorous appearance.
Now, seeing you love this so much, does that mean another Citroën is coming into the garage at home?
Well, we've actually got two Citroëns. I've bought my wife a brand new Citroën. We've got this one, and yeah, look, I love cars, and if I see something interesting and quirky, definitely.
And in terms of rallying, driving every day?
It's not a car that I drive every day, but being a guy that works in retail, we've got a store that opens 7 days a week. I tend to try and drive it most weekends.
What about the two little models on the dashboard? Some significance there?
Yeah, the Chaperon, which is the two-door convertible version of the DS. I would like to find one of those in my price range. A little bit hard.
What sort of price would you be looking at for a Chaperon?
Well, I saw the Sydney one got sold for $140,000 or somewhere around there, and the estimated value in the catalogue was about 60, so they're a little bit out.
So with this car being so beautifully restored, how do you feel about concourse and that condition some people like to restore cars to?
Oh look, I think it's, if you've got the, I don't know, the forthwith and the know-how, definitely go ahead and do it, but I certainly like to drive it. It's not something that I'd like to just keep in the garage and look at. I like to get it out there and give it a drive and let other people see, because a lot of people, especially in WA, they don't see these on the road too many times.
So you'd be very happy for us to borrow it weekend after weekend?
Well, you'd have to learn how to drive it, because it's quite unique to drive it.
Thanks for your help. And your
pleasure. Thank you very much.
Tom, tell us about this interesting Alpine you have.
Well, I bought it over the internet, sight unseen, about 2 years ago. Been driving in Europe for, well, I guess 10 months the last 2 years, and I've just brought it back to Perth.
And it could be an everyday car if you really want it to be?
Certainly has been for the last week, because I've been driving it every day.
And thoroughly enjoying it by the sound of it. Condition is pretty much as you were told it was?
Yeah, no, it was in good nick. I mean, I have given it a coat of paint since it arrived. Alpine never very good with their paintwork, unfortunately, because it's a fiberglass body, not metal.
And what else have you got in mind to tizzy it up a bit?
Nothing really. I mean, it's basically an original car.
When you get in there doing anything else at all, will you find any surprises? Is it so uniquely French, so different?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've had an Alpine expert in Brussels, where I've been living, have a good look at it over the last 2 years, and he can't find anything wrong with it.
An absolute pleasure to drive. How about performance as such?
Much too fast for Western Australian roads, unfortunately, but handles beautifully.
And you don't have trouble with the police?
So far, so good.
What about idiosyncrasies? Well known in European cars, particularly French again.
That's true. Haven't really discovered anything other. I mean, it's a bit cramped inside if you're 6 foot plus, little bit cramped. But other than that, no, it's a nice car.
What about the history of the car? Where did it actually live before you acquired it?
It's had 3 previous owners in the UK. It's one of a couple of hundred that were made in right-hand drive. Left the factory on 11th of October 1988. Blur Alpine, done 50,000 miles when I bought it, and so lived its life in the UK.
And I understand that you have some other UK cars in your stable at home.
Oh yes, very keen on post-war English sports cars. Second World War, that is.
What about the classic car scene here in West Australia? What's your most vocal comment on it?
It's getting better. I think there are people bringing in some interesting cars into the state. There seem to be more events now, so I think it's improving.
The question of concourse comes up often. Some people say it's a lot of nonsense, other people say it is so important. How do you feel about that marriage?
A lot of nonsense, I'm afraid. Cars, but I am not critical of anybody who wants, they can do what they like with their car. Cars are to be driven, in my view, and you know, if you can keep them looking nice and drive them, well, that's fine. But I don't think you should have a car just to look at.
So we'll never see this on a trailer?
Very unlikely.
And we'll see it at many shows from now on?
Absolutely.
And hopefully you too?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Tom, for your help.
with a huge 1300cc engine and a really cool power to weight ratio. Entries in all French motor cars, an enormous body roll. The body roll was singularly outdone by the Citroen Diane. Oh yes!
Ray Parker's red Lancia Gamma is a recent arrival from the UK. A few Lancias were sold in Perth in the 1920s by Gilbert's Limited, but the marque never really became known here until the 1960s, when Gresswell Motors in Carlisle specialised in them for 3 to 4 years. Sam Calabro, tell us about your little Alpha.
Well, it's a GDA, which is a lightened version of the 105 coupe, and it was basically lightened for racing. This is a 65 1600, one of 50 right-hand drive. They produced about 500 in total, and this is one of 3 in Australia.
Bertone or Zagato design?
Bertone.
Typical for Alphas?
Yes.
What is it that's particularly unique about this, the weight?
The weight, it's got a twin plug head, it's lightened, it's got a magnesium sump, magnesium rocker cover, the T-arm is aluminium, so basically they're probably 220 kilos lighter than
And where in Europe would we have seen them racing in their heyday?
in Italy, in Germany, all the major racetracks in Europe. In their period, they were European touring car champions.
Mille Miglia, that type of race?
Not so much the Mille Miglia. The Mille Miglia was a lot earlier than that. But mainly the touring car rounds of the European touring car rounds.
And do you like to rally it, or were you happy to compete?
I haven't been, but that was my idea to to sort of do a few rallies and a few hill climbs and a bit of sprint racing.
But for now, let's move on and take
Yes,
another exciting
yes.
episode in your life.
That's right.
Thanks for your help.
No worries.
Fiat cars were first sold in Perth in 1906 by the Dean Motor Car and Cab Company, although this 1500 was most probably sold by Dave Golding's Premier Motors. Seen in quite large numbers in Perth as new cars, sadly only a very few remain. They were very popular and an extremely good alternative to British and American cars of the era, and they were much loved by the generation of children born of post-World War II immigrants from Europe, particularly Italy. Gabriel, tell us about your Topolino. I believe it means Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, the name in English is Mickey Mouse, but in Italian they call it Topolino. This one, I got this one about 20 years, but only 11 years have been on the road because it was only bits and pieces. It was all in the box when I got it, really.
So you didn't bring it from Italy with you?
No, I bought it in Scarborough actually. It was an Aussie bloke.
And how many of them here in Perth?
I mean, years ago. Now, this is the only one on the road, I think, this model.
With a soft top?
With a soft top, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And can you drive that every day if you want to?
No. If I want, yeah, but they're not allowed to because it's in the club, you know, they've got a, what's the name?
Concessional licence?
Yeah, that's right. You can't drive every day.
Oh, thanks, Gabe. The rarely seen Fiat 1800 and 2300 models are on show here. Sadly, the plastics of that era and the non-ferrous metals employed in their making have not aged well in the extreme Australian climate, so preserving and restoring historic Fiats is a very difficult task beyond average restorers without a real passion for the marque. Reg Howard-Smith, thanks for joining us with your multipler. Tell us a little bit about this unusual car.
Well, it's a 1957 multipler, originally delivered in Victoria. I purchased it actually from Brisbane, and it was in a terrible state when I purchased it. And in fact, had an 850 engine in the back. They had used an angle grinder to cut most of the rear of the car. The motor, in fact, was welded in, believe it or not. So it's been a complete rebuild. The front panel, this panel here, is in fact brand new. The original one was full of bulk and other paraphernalia, and this panel was in fact found in Melbourne, a brand new panel hanging from the guy's roof. It's just one of those quirks when you restore cars.
And tell me about the window that's missing at the side, because you're not fully through restoration yet, are you?
That's correct. There are the two side middle windows are missing. I need double channel. They are sliding windows rather than wind up windows, and I'm finding it very difficult to find some double channel, but that really is all that remains to be done.
And we understand that here in Perth, the few that were sold were probably sold by Dave Golding at Premier Motors?
I would say so, because they would have come in probably 59, 60. They might have been a little bit earlier. They were certainly sold on the East Coast 57, 58, and this being 57. So it would probably have been Premier Motors, I would say.
And how long do you think before you get this finished?
Maybe a month. Maybe before Christmas, but well, fingers crossed.
And sitting in your garage here's another car?
About another 14.
So you're a dedicated Fiat enthusiast. Why the interest in Fiat and Italian cars?
They're pure art. They're pure art. Fiat's, Alfa Romeos and Lancias what occupy my garage. My next restoration will be a 1951 Fiat 1400 sedan.
So you have the passion of the true Italian.
Indeed.
They love their macchini, their machines.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Reg, for joining us.
Pleasure.
Andrew Murray's with us from the Alfa Romeo Club in Perth. Andrew, tell us a little bit about the Veloce. Unusual car, I believe.
Yes, this particular vehicle is a 1964 Spider Veloce. which means it has the higher performance 1600 twin carby motor, and this particular one is quite rare. It's one of only 2 in Australia, becoming reasonably sought after these days around the world.
And what did you chaps have to do to bring it up to this standard?
The car's been in fairly fine fettle all along, but it's had some light refurbishment and belongs to Rita Quinn, and it's had just some light improvement, but as you can see, it presents very well.
And do you think we should talk with its current owner, Rod Quinn?
I think you should.
Rod Quinn, as president of the Alfa Romeo Club here in Perth, tell us a bit about your unusual car.
It's a 1964 Veloce Spider. We came across it about 3 or 4 years ago in Melbourne and purchased it. It's one of 2 in Australia, and I think one of about 500 built. 1600 cc's, 5-speed gearbox, very light, and they're a very pretty little car, and always wanted it. And a chap in Melbourne had it for about 15 years, who bought it out from Italy, and it came for sale and we purchased it.
And how about driving around Perth streets being left-hand drive? Not a problem?
Not a problem. It's very, no problem driving left-hand drive there.
And at home, parked in the garage alongside is?
A coupe version of this, and a 328 Ferrari and some other Italian cars, yeah.
And beyond that, in terms of the club, where is it going tomorrow?
The club, we're sort of in a bit of a rebuilding stage of the Alfa Club. We've recently reassociated ourselves with the Western Australian dealer, being Barbagallo's. We're running sort of sprint and driver training days in conjunction with Barbagallo's this year, and the club, is increasing in size. We had a bit of a lull there for about the last 4 years, but it's growing in strength, and we're getting new members, etc. So yeah, no, it's good.
Lightburn, famous for its Australian-built Zeta cars, first sold Alfa Romeos in Perth around 1965, these coming from Lightburn's Nova Park home base in Adelaide, where they were assembled. Electrician and car sales representative Daryl Barrow worked for Lightburn in Murray Street from '67 and says the firm was just finishing with Alfas then, as they had recently lost the franchise. This is a rare orange Alfa Romeo Montreal. Classified as one of the real European exotics, the Montreal is also one of Alfa's prettiest designs, truly worth letting catch your eye. The unique see-through eyebrows cause people to stop and stare at the Petone design. Rob de Girolami, thanks for joining us with your Alfa. Unusual car, unusual colour for an Alfa.
It's a beautiful colour, yes. It's rosso grigio, or grey. It's not red, yes.
And your interest in Alfas?
It was like a boyhood dream for me. Always loved Alfas, and decided to buy one day on Father's Day 3 years ago.
At the same time your wife actually bought your model, I believe?
Yes, she bought me a model 1750 for Father's Day. Searched all over Perth, and then that same day in the paper there was a 1750. I bought this vehicle, so it was meant to be. It was karma.
1750, that's pretty cheap for an Alfa. Oh, you don't mean $17.50?
No, it's the model number, yeah. And it's my favourite model, and yeah, I'm very happy with this vehicle.
Why the move away from the old days of Falcons, Holdens, etc.?
Well, I've got Italian heritage, as you can probably tell, and everyone can afford those type of cars. Also, these type of cars, it's really good for as a driving experience, I think. So that's probably my main move.
As a man in IT, can you see any correlation between the level of electronics and computerisation in this model compared with today's cars?
There's a lot less of it, as we know, and that really suits me because I can work on it, you see, and because I'm an IT guy, I'm usually on a keyboard. On weekends, I'm rolling up my sleeves and getting my fingers dirty, which is what I like to do.
Thanks for sharing your passion, Rob.
Thank you very much.
Perth automotive historian Paul Blank tells us Lamborghini expanded its sports car range with the Urraco, selling it against Porsche's 911, Ferrari's 308 and the Maserati Marque. The 2+2 Urraco featured a mid-mounted V8 quad-cam engine in 2.5 and later 3-litre version. Most of the Urracos in Australia are the P250 with a smaller engine. Owner of this Piaggio three-wheeler, Sam Fafaro, remembers, "It lived here in Fremantle when I bought it in 1989. It's actually a taxi version like you see overseas, and that's why it has the double rear bench seat. It carries 400 kilograms payload and is the only RP, which means Big B, Piaggio that I know of in Perth. This particular one has 150 cc's, 4 speeds forward and 4 speeds backwards." Merv Concannon, thanks for joining us with your very interesting Mancy. I believe it's got an interesting story.
It is. It's an interesting little motor car. It's what they call a Flavia Berliner. And it's a Miliotto, which means 1800 in English. I bought the car from a farmer in Kellerberrin, or just out of Kellerberrin, and he had it stuck in his storage shed, machine shed, and it was covered in chook, poo, and I'm sure he carried sheep in the front seat at some stage. But we were going to tow it home with my ute, and he said, don't be bothered towing it. He said, drive the bugger home. So we did just that, and then I set to work getting it looking a little bit more tidy. It's certainly not concourse, but it's a tidy car. We decided to go to the Lancia Rally in Castlemaine, and we didn't want to flog the little car all the way across the Nullarbor, but we did decide to put it on the train to Adelaide, and then we stayed with a good friend there, a Lancia person, and drove the 680 k's to Castlemaine, and had a wonderful time with the Lancia people there, and then drove it the 680 k's back, plus another few hundred on the way, and we never used a drop of water or a drop of oil.
And no spare parts or breakdowns?
No breakdowns at all. It just went like a dream. But despite their rather plain looks, they are a wonderfully comfortable motor car. In fact, they were designated by the factory as a limousine in their day.
And how many of those in Perth?
Well, I'd say that I've got probably the only two that are running at the moment, but there may be one or two sitting around in sheds or backyards.
Any idea who would have sold them here originally in Perth?
Premier Motors were an agent at one stage, and also Frank Kelly, and I think probably Ciliberti may have had something, but they may be a bit too early for Cilibertis, I'm not sure.
Okay. And how do you go for parts?
Good. The actual network, the Grapevine is very good. We've got contacts all over Australia, and in fact the Lancia club in the UK is marvellous. They've got a big supply.
I believe you're a very nice person too. You let the cameraman and the interviewer actually drive around for a couple of weeks.
Oh, you could do that as long as you can, well, you can pay the fee, the small fee.
Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you, John.
485 horsepower, a top speed listed at 320, that's 200 miles an hour. Classic rally polo shirts, sweatshirts, rugby tops, caps. There's also some other gear from Canteen, the Australian Teenage Cancer Society, the Royal Soldier, and the Royal Kids from Canteen. Horsepower. Simon finished fourth outright in the recent London to Sydney Marathon, has won 2 West Australian Rallyman Championships and a Group N Championship on the gravel. Not in the Ferrari, of course, but he is still a very, very tidy driver. The Ferrari, like the others and the Lamborghinis, are much wider in the world. He doesn't spare this car at all. He's coming through quick. This is going to finish up in the 20. Tito from Canteen. A coin will help. Anything you put in at all will be greatly appreciated. Car number 16.
I've just actually the company's changed off on the so I've just given up the last year. But I've been old resident for years. I've been involved for 9 years. I have to have a look because I haven't done it yet. No, I haven't! I go ahead. Oops, there's a company.
Over here, this way, this way. Get ready.
Number 31 is a 1926 Alfa Romeo. This car was in fact Enzo Ferrari's personal racing car. Savour its shape and sounds as you see it perform round the houses in rural Northern.
I'm a Polly, but I live in America, but I knew of this car in Belgium.
One, the 1938 registered Chevrolet. Historic significance. It's certainly got a fair distance
Records show that the Volkswagen Beetle was first sold in Perth in 1951 from Tivoli Garage. Gregory's, Regent Motors and Webster Motors of Midland became three of Perth's biggest retailers later. Dealer Peter Webster even set his Volkswagen up to travel on water to join the flotilla of watercraft on the Swan River the day that Perth's Narrows Bridge was opened in 1959. It hit the headlines and photos of the occasion were even seen in the European press.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just too much. Well, I was looking to do a PhD on this historically. It made a good wind break. I said, you wait till I break wind.
Occasional examples of an original Carman gear are still seen on Perth streets, and more have been collected for restoration purposes. Not much different from a Volkswagen mechanically, the unusual styling attracts people wherever the cars go.
With us is Ian Corrins. Ian is a Borgwood enthusiast. Ian, tell us about your blue car.
Well, the car originally came from Tasmania. It was bought new in Tasmania, spent most of its life in Tasmania. It ended up at a dealer in Adelaide about 8-9 years ago when Willie Cerrone bought it, and I bought it from Willie 2 years ago. So I've had it 2 years, and it's an original car.
So you really haven't done much restoration?
No, it's had a paint job, same colour as the original. Other than that, just a bit of cleaning up, touching up at it, the usual things on an old car.
None of those wonderful surprises we all find in restorations then?
No, it looks like it was well looked after.
And what's it like on the road to drive?
I drove it to Kalgoorlie last weekend, first long trip, and it's very comfortable. Goes very well, 60 mile an hour, about 34 miles to the gallon. So I was very happy.
Very acceptable, isn't it?
Yeah, that is for an old car.
Tell us about its idiosyncrasies. Being European, it probably has some pretty avant-garde sort of technology.
It's actually, I wouldn't say it has many weird features about it. Just the strangest thing, they don't have armrests on the door, so you have to open the window to pull the door closed. But that seems to be the weirdest thing I've come across.
Well, thanks, Ian. Perhaps we'll talk with Willie now about his 1960 Borgwood. Willie Cerrone, part of the Vintage Automobile Association of WA, is well known for his vast collection of cars and huge number of restorations. Willie, tell us about this one, the Borgwood.
Well, this one I bought from South Australia probably about 9 years ago, and like usual it's supposed to be an older restoration, and of course by the time I got it home, what's supposed to be an older restoration, it was a bucket of rust. So I virtually had to pull the whole thing apart and put a new floor in it, and quite a lot of work went into it actually. We were saying the difference between the 59 and 60. The 60 has got armrest, where the 59 hasn't, and the grille is slightly different. So apart from that, they're basically the same car as the 59.
So it's been a full restoration then?
Yeah, it's been a full restoration. And the other thing I did do, as you probably noticed, to get one of these in convertible from Germany, which you wouldn't be able to get, but you're probably talking $60,000-$70,000. So I did the next best thing, and I made a convertible out of this one. Very the same shape as the original one, so I made sure everything is very much the same.
So in that sense, it's the only one here in Perth?
This would be the only one in Australia convertible, yes.
And to drive, very similar to the coupe?
Very similar, yeah, very similar. Yeah, now coil springs all around, as probably a lot of people would know. So they're quite advanced little car. They've got a 1500 motor overhead valve. The factory guarantees it at 92 mile an hour, but when England did a test on it, they got up to 100 mile an hour, which is, even today's standards, I feel it's very, very good.
And why Borgwood? Did you grow up with them as a young man in Europe?
I did have one in the early days, back in probably 1960, the same model as this one actually, 1960, and I've had about 7 Hansers at that time. So just recently I bought another Hanser sedan, which are a bit hard to come by. The station wagon are quite easy, but the sedans I only bought a few out. So I've completely restored that. Well, it's 99% finished now, so basically finished.
And what about a list of the other brand names of cars you've got in your collection?
To start off with the older one, 1927 Studi, which I took to Canberra and back again, drove it all the way there and back. 29 Studebaker Erskine, 1938 DKW 2-cylinder, 1957 DKW, which is a 3-cylinder, they're both 2-strokes. 1963 Studebaker station wagon with a sliding roof, and of course this one here. Yeah.
And tell us about the colour. It's unusual for a 50s car.
Yeah, no, they actually, if you got the original brochure, actually shows this colour on the front page. So they made quite a few different colours actually.
And when you're restoring, your aim is to make a car, bring it back to concourse condition?
Not probably exactly concourse, because I do like to use the car, but they all look, you know, pretty good. I've won trophies for this, the same as for the other ones. So they're not quite concourse, but close to it.
Some DKWs were sold in Perth by the Diesel Motor Company. Perth enthusiast Maurice Davin says, these had local bolt bodies. It is believed that they were 1938 models sold new in post-World War II Perth, and they were ex-South Africa. I'm not aware of there being a dealer for the post-World War II AU model DKW in WA, but they were sold new in the eastern states. There are only a handful of these little cars around Perth today. Around 1899, a Benz came to Perth with entrepreneur George Brookman, while another was brought in by William Delisle. Benz cars were also sold from 1905 in Perth by the American Motor Car and Vehicle Company. Once Benz became Mercedes-Benz, a few were sold by the Perth Motor Company, but it was not until after World War II that the marque became well known and Diesel Motors had the franchise. Although a number of other local firms have dabbled in selling Mercedes-Benz vehicles, it is Diesel Motors and its new sister company West Point Star which have become the recognised purveyors of the marque. It is of interest that Diesel Motors chief Ian Goldie has noticed that south of the river buyers like the older style traditional Mercedes-Benz models, while those living north of the river relate best to the new styles introduced to very recent years. Tivoli Garage Group sold these in 1959. When the franchise was dropped, it was taken on by Winterbottom Motors. Maurice Davin observes, I believe that about 12 KR200 Messerschmitts, 12 KR201s and at least one KR175 were sold here by Winterbottoms, or it may have been a division called Winter Court Motors. Apart from Mason Motors having brought in a BMW Isetta in the late 1950s, they did not appear again until 1967, when Continental Motors became sole state distributors. But these cars did not sell well, and local dealer Barry Litton began to look out for a new home for BMW. Alan Wilkie's Classic Car Centre acquired the BMW dealership in 1970, with it becoming Auto Classic in 1979, and from whence BMW has gained one of the top selling spots for exotic cars today in Perth. Kieran Featherstone tells us, I believe this is the only 23 window Samba in Australia, and the paint scheme is as it was from the factory. I grew up racing beach buggies, and then the Samba came into my life. I believe the bus was brought to Australia from Jersey by its original English owners, and I think I was the only one who really knew what the bus was. From the moment I first saw it parked at a friend's place, I drooled over it and would tell anyone prepared to listen what a classic this bus was.
Cowan, thanks for joining us. You're obviously fairly unique in this motor racing. At your age, tell us.
Yeah, it all started when I was about 6 when my dad bought me an electric car. And I started doing all these little stunts in the back garden. Then I got into go-karting. And then I just came to a stage where none of that was really an adrenaline rush anymore. So I asked my dad's permission, and our first event was the Burswood Classic Rally, which we raced the Nissan Skyline GTST in, and then after that we just evolved into a BMW, which now I'm allowed to race by myself.
And tell us about this piece, because she's pretty special, I think.
She is. I wash her every single week. No one else touches it. It's got a Magnaflow exhaust system, pod filter, and a short shift gearbox. It's got a Type R Alpine sound system, and that's pretty much what it's got.
Being a 1983 Porsche 911 Targa 3.2 engine. still holds the lap record of most race circuits in Australia for Porsche Cup and has won Australian Porsche Cup. But she Mission Skyline GTRs over the year, and each year when he gets built, he goes for a faster load car. We'd like to make a donation to Canteen. You're most welcome as the young mate brings the can around. Car number 65, Michael Broughton and James Ryan. One of the best presented cars in the rally, a genuine 1965 Porsche 356 Coupe, 1720cc. Last version of 356 ever built was the same year as the 911 was introduced. As I said down the bottom, if you'd like to make a donation to Canteen, the Australian Canteen, the Teenage Cancer Patients Society, you're most welcome. And can take any coins or notes that you may have. It goes to extremely worthwhile cause.